Forests cover 30% of the Earth's surface and, as well as providing safe food and shelter, they are essential for fighting climate change and protecting biodiversity and the homes of indigenous people. Every year, millions of hectares of forest are lost due to phenomena such as deforestation and desertification caused by human activities and climate change. This leads to the impoverishment of those people who depend on forests for their livelihoods. This number includes about 70 million indigenous people. Furthermore, forests are the habitat of more than 80% of terrestrial species of animals, plants, and insects. The phenomenon of desertification also affects a large area of land every year. Due to drought and desertification, 12 million hectares are lost every year, land where various products could potentially have been cultivated, leading to an impoverishment of the various population living on subsistence. Another worrying factor that should alarm us is the extinction of thousands of animal and plant species. Of the 83,000 new animal species, the 80% are extinct and 22% are threatened with extinction. Man cannot live alone. He is part of his environment and gets everything he needs from it, from the food he eats to the oxygen he breathes. If the ecosystem degrades, animal and plant life suffers. We are witnessing a progressive degradation of our planet, of nature that surrounds us, but all is not lost. We can still do something. That is why the 2030 agenda was drawn up. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development is a program of action for people, planet and prosperity, signed in September 2015 by the governments of the 193 United Nations member states. It incorporates 17 Sustainable Development Goals. In particular, Item 15 of the 2030 Agenda has its main goal to protect, restore, and promote the sustainable use of terrestrial ecosystem, sustainably manage forests, combat desertification, halt and reserve land degradation, and halt biodiversity loss. Fortunately, many countries have realized the importance of preserving our home and are taking steps to conserve, restore, and make sustainable use of natural resources. Forest loss is slowing down. Protection of key biodiversity areas has risen sharply. Vegetation in mountainous areas has expanded, and more investment is promoting biodiversity protection. About 14% of the land area is protected through national parks, nature reserves, and protected areas. Good news then, however, land degradation continues. Biodiversity loss is occurring at an alarming rate, and invasive species, poaching, and illegal wildlife trade continue to throw efforts to protect and restore vital ecosystems. However, we must not give up, because nature is fundamental to mankind, and this is something that even the ancients knew as far back as Romanticism. For the Romantics, nature played a fundamental role. It is the place where the soul can give vent to its melancholy, and the most interesting phenomena are precisely those that are outside the norm, putting the individual in contrast with a higher dimension, which he cannot perceive with the help of reason, but only by indulging his sense and imagination. Nature that the Romantics told is a powerful, energetic nature, which makes the observer feel various feelings such as awe, wonder, and at the same time fear and sense of inferiority. It establishes a dialogue with the artist, conveying strong emotions. The concept of the sublime acquired importance. Everything that can arise ideas of pain and danger, it is what produces the strongest emotion that the soul is capable of feeling. This is what Edmund Burke wrote in his essay on the origin of our ideas of the sublime and the beautiful. Nature, immeasurable in its grandeur and vastness, fearsome and powerful, capable of annihilating man, inspires power and titanic wonder. The sublime also arose from widely seeing from a distance and therefore with tranquility, as refined shame brought about by nature, such as the eruption of a volcano. The concept of the sublime entered deeply into the romantic passion and mentality, together with the relationship between soul and nature, between painting and the inner experience, inhered from the 18th century, and the conviction that art could be a vehicle for sublime sensation. The two main authors of this period are William Wordsworth and Samuel Taylor Coleridge. Both worked together in the same collection of poems called lyrical ballads, their writings. Nevertheless, they present different visions and styles. Wordsworth's view, focused on the contemplation of a humble rustic nature, is clearly stated in a preface to the lyrical ballads.
In it, Wordsworth wanted to express his theory of poetry. He describes his theory of poetic creation in 4 steps. A poet needs to choose events or facts from common life, usually rural environments and situations involving a connection in nature. The scenes describe belonging to the romantic, ideal environment. Everything comes from natural and humble life because the passions find a better soil there. And the poet can express his feelings better that are not corrupted by civilization and society yet. In the second part, the poet describes his role. A poet is a man speaking to man. He is more gifted than a common man because he believes that the subject matter should deal with events and situations from common life written in a common language. The poet needs to transform events he has chosen using his own imagination to make them more interesting. He gives a lot of importance to imagination because it makes incidents interesting. It is a gift that only poets possess, and it allows them to understand the real essence of things. And this is the reason why common people can't appreciate what nature offers. The poet uses his imagination to transmit common people the feeling and emotion which nature transmits to him. The poet doesn't write his poetry while he is in nature because he is so fascinated that he is not able to write. To produce his poem, in fact, he takes inspiration from an emotion relieved in tranquility when he is at home. The poet needs to recollect the previous experience, and thanks to imagination, he is able to recreate the emotions previously felt. Another example of the contemplation of the natural landscape and its beauty can be found in I Wander Lonely as a Cloud, where we can see how Wordsworth sees nature as a way to escape from the effects of industrialization. The cradle of English Romanticism is composed of elements like glacier-shaped valleys, gorges, steep rocks, and cracks. America's national parks spring from an idea as radical as the Declaration of Independence, that the nation's most magnificent and sacred places should be preserved, not for royalty or the rich, but for everyone. To be sure, the United States was the first, beginning with Yellowstone in 1872, to create national parks by statute, and that visionary action sparked a movement that would spread across the world. Wordsworth has also inspired later American authors such as Ralph Waldo Emerson and Henry David Thoreau, whose philosophy anticipated the environmental movement in the United States. In a time when people increasingly lived in cities, it became possible to think of wilderness as a place that could restore bodies and spirits. The parks are also still important. One example must be the Adamello Brenta Nature Park. It is the largest protected area in Trentino, established in 1967. It extends in western Trentino and includes the Adamello and Brenta mountain groups. It is crossed by Val Rendena and surrounded by the Non, Sole and Giudicarie valleys. Entering the park, nature immediately conquers us with uncontaminated landscapes, of unique beauty. Here we can experience unrepeatable emotions, admiring the Brenta Dolomite, majestic peaks tinged with red at sunset. Stroll along fairy tale lakes where you can lose yourself in wild nature, or try your hand at reaching the Adamello Glacier, one of the largest in Europe.
There is breathtaking landscape that surround us make us understand the importance of nature and its beauty. As we said, Wordsworth believed that poetry takes its origin from emotion. In some ways, Leopardi too had a very similar vision. Leopardi believed that remembrance played an important role in poetry. Nature is seen as a life source because any natural element is alive, and man is very small before it. Nature was created by God, and man can find a friend in nature. On the contrary, Leopardi believed, despite its beauty, that nature appeared indifferent to the suffering of man. He initially believed that nature was benevolent, and something beautiful which later developed into a bad mother because indifferent to man. In fact, every day are natural disaster. However, we must not see nature as something evil because at the same time it provides us with shelter, and in fact in many times because of our fault that it rebels. Nature arouses many emotions not only in Wordsworth's mind but also in the works of some artists such as John Constable. In Flatford Mill, the nature landscape is the protagonist, and we can say the words sum as Wordsworth's vision of nature and its tranquility. In contrast, Coleridge proposed another kind of nature. He was the poet of the supernatural, of mystery and power. He exalted Burke's idea of sublime and this found inspiration in the figure of nature as a being of titanic strength and power. An example of Wordsworth that reflect this vision are those of William Turner. Among the English Romantic painters, he is undoubtedly the most passionate and sensitive interpret of the poetic of the sublime, the dynamic sublime, as Kant defined it, which concerns the manifestation of nature characterized by a great explosion of energy, which imposes itself grandly on man the point of strangling his senses. The subject of some of his most typical paintings are precisely sea storms in which the force of embodiment gives great dynamism to the composition. Example, the virtue of the Minotaur. The importance of nature and the sublime can also be found in the philosopher Immanuel Kant. Kant's definition of the sublime is the opposite of his definition of the beautiful. If the beautiful arises from an agreement between imagination and the intellect and directly implies a feeling of facilitation and identification of life, the sublime arises from a disharmony between imagination and reason. Moreover, for Kant, the sublime leads spirit into incessant movement while the beautiful gives rest. Kant, in his treatment of the sublime, kept in mind Burke's formulation that is the paper origin of our ideas of the sublime, and the beautiful says that the sublime is based on pain, the beautiful on pleasure. Sometimes the risk is that nature can prove more beautiful than man and at any moment devast us. If we do not respect it, however, this happens. One example is the SARS-CoV-19 epidemic that has been sweeping through us recently. This is a statement by the United Nations, the World Health Organization, and WWF International. It is a reality that we have known for decades and we have recollected and ignored. Illegal wildlife trade, deforestation, and the destruction of other natural places, with tremendous effect on wildlife, are the main factors in the growing number of zoonosis. This is the disease that transmit from animals to humans. We must therefore respect nature and ensure health and well-being for all ages. Key point in Goal 3 of the 2030 Agenda. In the Romantic Age, working men were overworked and unpaid, but we think the main problem was working conditions, which were terrible for the health of workers. In addition to this, industrial work spread and that wasn't good for our planet. In a polluted environment, it is really hard to be healthy. We can also see industrialization and all its related problems as a plague for our planet. A disease that romantic authors and poets wanted to fix with their romantic movement. Walking in the open air and keeping fit as Wordsworth did his life is important. We remember his walks near little lakes in the park of among flower meadows. In addition to this, if you go outside you can be inspired by nature, and due to this you can be productive, while if you stay at home for all day you can. We would like to end our presentation with the Wrath of the Medusa by the French romantic painters Jerry Colt. Our condition is very similar to that of these castaways. We are on this raft, immersed in the sea of nature. Nature has given us a taste of what it can do if we do not respect and protect it. Our condition is precarious. Everything depends on us. If, when we reach dry land in safety, we understand that something has to change, then we will really have saved ourselves. If not, our fate will be sealed, and surviving the shipwreck will have meant nothing, because we will be condemned to die anyway.